in a year's time.
Well, joining me now via Skype from Durham in the UK is Professor Thom Brooks from Durham University. Thanks very much for your time, Professor. Look, she survived. Theoretically, it's 12 months of survival. Is that the practical impact, though?
I think she'll be very lucky to make it for 12 months. Indeed, I think she'd be lucky to even make it to March. This was a victory in the sense that she will almost certainly remain in 10 Downing Street over Christmas. But she's in a really difficult position in so many ways. She had a lot more members of her own party express a vote of no confidence in her. And it means right now that in Parliament, in her minority government, she does not command a majority, that only 1/3 of the MPs have confidence in the Prime Minister. There seems to be no plan, certainly not hers, that has a majority of support for any type of Brexit, certainly the kind that she wants. And so while she limps on, it's not quite clear how she can limp on for much longer.
Well, given she herself has apparently said she's not going to try to lead them to the next election in 2022, it seems like it's just almost a legacy issue now, that she wants to see through what so far has defined her.
I think you're right. I think she is committed to seeing through this legacy issue, but it's not quite clear why or what will change. So there is no change of government. There isn't a change in Prime Minister. There's not a change in leader. There is no new mandate for the Prime Minister to go to Brussels and argue for anything new. The EU leaders have made clear they will not budge. She spent much of about 2 years now in addition to having the formal meetings with the EU negotiators, sending members of her senior team to the different European capitals to try to get side agreements or things to divide and conquer effectively the EU. That has really not worked at all. The EU has been very robust the whole time. So it's not quite clear what will change over the next weeks and months despite this. And if she can't bring any change, there seems to be no support, if anything, anger or disappointment and opposition to her plans seems to be growing, not just in her own party and in Parliament, but also in the public.
Well, you mentioned how steadfast the EU leaders are right now. So it begs the question, even if she goes tomorrow, what can someone else do? What would their approach be?
Well, until Monday morning in the UK, she has been saying this has been basically a decision between her Brexit as the only kind of viable Brexit or some type of so-called no-deal arrangement, which would genuinely, I think, be very difficult for the UK to stomach because there is really no preparation, nothing in place to handle crashing out without any transition. So what changed on Monday is the European Court of Justice said that Parliament could, without the EU's approval or any extra process, Parliament in Britain could choose to stay in the European Union, and it could also choose to extend or delay the Brexit date beyond 29th of March. Putting aside the question of how angry members of the Conservative Party and indeed some sections of the public would be about something like this, it's not quite a measure of one thing or another. So those who are for staying in the European Union, that option is actually there. And those who want a different type of Brexit, whether it be harder or softer, can now oppose the Prime Minister's plan and have some third option available.
There was a lot of talk straight after the vote that maybe in the weeks afterwards a few people realised what they'd voted for and had a bit of buyer's regret. But the vote carried. So where are we for popular support? Do you think it has dropped enough that if somehow there was another vote on this, we'd see a different result?
I think we might. I mean, when we look at the Remain versus Leave referendum, of course, we all know the results on the day. But other than a few days over the course of several months, Remain was always in the lead, though its support was always very soft. We now see Remain again in the lead over Leave by a greater margin than it was before. And I think one of the genuine kind of game changers, if you like, is that when the referendum was won by the Leave camp, Theresa May summed it up quite well, actually. She said, Brexit means Brexit. You had various different factions who all had different understandings of what Brexit means. Part of the Prime Minister's big problem is she's been trying to make everyone happy by trying to satisfy a number of red lines that crisscross against each other that lead to no one being happy. So I think that what's changed is we've got over 500 pages now of fine print that's not certainly pleased the Remain supporters. Of course, maybe we would expect that. But it certainly hasn't pleased the Leave supporters, most of which have been in her party, and they are the ones, the Leavers, not the Remainers, the Leavers, who have brought about this vote on whether or not there was any confidence in the Prime Minister. So I think that a lot of things have changed. I think the public has seen that a lot of things they were promised will not come true, or be a lot more difficult than were promised, and there will be some second guessing going forward.
Is it still gripping the public over there? It just strikes me, this feels like 2 years of almost the same headlines. Every day, every week. Sometimes it's hard to even, to be honest, read to the end of the article because it just seems like the same story or a different version of it every single day.
I think that's a very fair comment. You've had, I think, for much of the last 2 years, a lot of posturing by the Prime Minister. A lot of the speeches, a lot of the comment, a lot of the headlines have been directed almost entirely at a domestic audience. Tough talk about no deal is better than a bad deal, which is absolutely crazy given that there's been no planning for a no deal and how much that would harm so much of the UK. So it's been kind of focused that way. And you have a lot of folks who were involved in running that referendum campaign for leaving. All of them fled the scenes when it came time to actually delivering this. And so you've got a lot of folks kind of making promises, but not in a position of doing anything about it. So there hasn't really been any progress on that. To be fair to the Prime Minister, she's tried to make some headway. And I think given some of the conflicting statements that Leave supporters have made, has tried to do the best she can in cobbling something together. And it turns out it involves staying in a customs arrangement for some time, which was not what the Leave people had said. And it hasn't made the kind of progress, hasn't delivered on the promises that were made. Because a lot of us have been kept in the dark. Indeed, her cabinet was kept very much in the dark. They didn't know her plan until September. And that's when we started seeing the beginning of a lot of resignations. Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, being one of them. So a lot of us have been in the dark. It doesn't seem much progress has been made. She hasn't gone very far. And I think that reading is right. She's really not taking this as seriously as people, as I would have hoped she did. And I think the final comment I'd make is this. A lot of her supporters thought that in playing tough and throwing this no deal talk around, the EU would generally going to cave and going to give a free trade agreement and going to give Britain pretty much what we've got right now at knockdown prices. And that hasn't happened. And they didn't expect that. And they're dealing with that cost right now.
Hang in there. Hopefully only a few months to go with this. Professor Thom Brooks, thanks for your time.
A pleasure.
Coming up next, Queensland battens down the